So I thought I'd give him an opportunity, except I get to make the rules. Martha brought up 3 points I thought that were interesting. One was with respect to the image of God. One was about the cultural explosion that you referred to, and the other one was about evolution. So why don't we give Dr. Rana 4 or 5 minutes, pick one of those 3, and let's see what he has to say.
Yeah, real quickly with the idea that the way in which I'm defining the image of God, or in fact the way theologians, at least some theologians, would define the image of God as circular, I think is an interesting point that's raised. And I'm not completely convinced that that's in fact a legitimate objection, because I'm not saying that that this is the way human beings are. We're calling that the image of God, and therefore this is what God is like, and that we're created in God's image. But rather, I'm looking at what is it about human beings that make human beings unique compared to other creatures on the planet. And that's what I'm using to, and others would use to distinguish the image of God, or to define or to give some parameters to what we mean by the image of God. So it's rather a comparison as opposed to a circular definition, if you will. And in terms of the idea that the sociocultural Big Bang is not explicable, or sorry, the sociocultural Big Bang is explicable by just some kind of snowball effect with regard to technology development, I don't think is a proper way that is not a proper characterization of the sociocultural Big Bang. But anthropologists believe that when that happened, there was something fundamentally happening within the human species that was of a biological nature that allowed human beings to have a capacity that did not exist on the planet prior to that. And so the capability of the first humans that display, again, this dramatic difference in behavior compared to the other hominids is the same capacity that we have today. I do agree that technology does evolve and evolves at an increasingly rapid rate, but I think it's important not to conflate cultural or technological evolution with the intrinsic capacity of human beings, which again is what I'm arguing that you see in the sociocultural Big Bang. And I don't agree that it's a God of the gaps argument, because it's not saying that we don't know what happened, or it's a gap in our knowledge, and therefore we're inserting God's involvement in terms of creating the Imago Dei, but rather we're saying here's a certain feature of the archaeological record that at least based on the data that we have today, seems to indicate an explosive appearance and a dramatic change in human uniqueness. And that I think is a fingerprint or a signature that you would expect to see if human beings are indeed made in God's image. That's the type of change I believe you would see in the archaeological record. And then finally, you raise an interesting point that I think is a good point, is that I agree with you that I think there can be a rational basis by which we arrive at objective moral truth, and I believe that that is, again, compatible with the idea that morality is revealed to us or given to us from a creator. Because again, if that's the case, we should be able to arrive at the same laws through rational deliberation as we would receive them, because again, I don't believe that those laws are arbitrary. But just because we can also instinctually make decisions about what is right and wrong without rational deliberation doesn't mean that when we rationally deliberate about those, what we perceive as right or wrong instinctually, that we wouldn't wind up at the same place. In other words, I don't think that rational deliberation and instinctual decision-making necessarily preclude different outcomes. I think they would converge at the same outcome. So that's how I would respond to that. So, thanks.
Thank you. Now we'll get into our discussion. So we had a lot of agreement tonight, and I wanted to just switch gears a little bit and ask the both of you if you're familiar with Sam Harris's new book, The Moral Landscape. Okay, I'll go back a second and we'll talk about David Hume. David Hume argued that you can't derive an ought from an is. Sam Harris seems to think differently. In his book, he argues that science will increasingly be able to answer the ought questions. And I'm just going to give you two quotes from his book. He says, questions about values, about meaning, morality, and life's greater purpose are really questions about the well-being of conscious creatures. Values, therefore, translate into facts that can be scientifically understood. The next one is, the more we understand ourselves at the level of the brain, the more we will see that there are right and wrong answers to questions about human values. Now, Dr. Rana, you brought up neurology. I think Sam Harris is a philosopher, so there's some philosophy in there. So the question is, given advances in neurology and neuroimaging, will we one day in practice be able to make moral decisions, or objective, empirical, scientific determinations about what is moral? Anyone want to go first?
I have a strong opinion about this, so I don't know. I could go first.
Go ahead.
I actually don't agree with Sam Harris. I'm actually in the process of reading The Moral Landscape right now. But I presented the hypothetical, the form of all moral conclusions in my presentation, and if you value X, then you will do Y to the extent that Y leads to X. Yeah, science can help us understand what sorts of Ys will allow us to achieve our X's. Like, for example, if you value health, science will tell you how to be healthy. If you value psychological well-being, science can tell you how to be psychologically well off. But what science can't do is tell you what to value. It can't tell you that you should value freedom, for example. It can just tell you how to achieve, let's say science was fully developed to an infallible degree or something. It can tell you how to achieve perfect freedom. But it seems strange to me. Let me put it this way. I don't understand how science could ever tell us what we should value. That's sort of a disagreement I have with Sam Harris.
Yeah, and I'm not in the process of reading the book. I'm in the process of watching it sit on my desk, knowing that I need to read it to prepare for this debate. So, but I'm actually looking forward to taking a look at his ideas. And, from my perspective, I'm not opposed to trying to, again, study morality in a scientific manner, or trying to use neuroscience as a way to understand how the brain works and how that then contributes to our sense of morality. I think that's an intriguing idea that really needs to be pursued, because any information that we can have about how we operate as human beings and why we desire certain things, I think is only going to be useful insight. So I'm not sure that there's anything that I would object to in that, but I do think that your comments are excellent comments, that science can tell us the pathway to how we can achieve a goal, but I don't believe that science can tell us what that goal should be.
I should clarify. I should just say that this doesn't lead me to something like moral skepticism, because as I said, I believe that objective morality is based not in science, but on caring about what other people's interests are. And I think that's really what we need to do.
Okay, fair enough. Is there a question you'd like to ask Dr. Rana directly that you don't think has been answered yet?
Yeah, I'd like to pursue several fronts, I guess. Maybe where to start on the image of... Yeah, on the image of God, I think might be a good place to start. You said that it wasn't defined circularly, and because the image of God is understandable in terms of what makes us unique. But why choose to understand the image of God that way? I mean, why not say the image of God is those aspects of us that make us similar to the animal kingdom, or maybe that the image of God is those aspects that lead us into antisocial behavior. It just seems strange to me that you're starting with the definition that the image of God is those qualities that are good about us, and then arriving at the conclusion that we need the image of God to give us value.
Yeah, and the reason why I would argue that the way to understand the image of God is how are humans distinct from other creatures is derived from, again, the Old Testament or the New Testament, for that matter, don't define what the image of God is, but the text speaks about human beings as uniquely possessing God's image. This is particularly evident throughout the Old Testament. And so I'm using that as the basis to say, okay, if that's the case, then the way we define the image of God is what is it that sets us apart from other creatures. So that's the basis for doing that. And to be fair, I'm not a theologian, but I do know that there are a number of different models in terms of how theologians have approached what the image of God is. So this is my preference in terms of how to understand it, but there would be other people who would be here as theologians who would not necessarily agree with my analysis. So that's be fair about that.
Is there a question you'd like to come up with?
Yeah, I think I would like to explore the idea a little bit as to, again, how you would justify that human beings have value, apart from, again, the idea that they are part of the purpose of the universe, or that they are the object of creation, the crown of creation. And I'm not saying that, again, a non-believer can't deeply value human life and start at the same starting point as a believer would necessarily. But how is it that you justify that would be the question, from an evolutionary or naturalistic framework?
That's a great question. I would answer that in two ways. First of all, I would say that I don't see, again, just repeating what I said, I'm not sure I see how specifying our being created with a purpose somehow gives us value. That's a point that I would like, maybe that might be my next question. But the second part of my response would be that I look to those aspects of human beings that you yourself identify the image of God as being defined by or informed by because they're valuable. I mean, it's sort of strange that you would ask me that, because you are yourself identifying these are the aspects of human beings that are valuable. And so we can understand the image of God with reference to them. And above and beyond just recognizing that our ability to love one another, to do poetry, to engage in these self-sacrificial altruistic acts, to do calculus and physics and chemistry, above and beyond recognizing our ability to do that, I don't think that there is anything additional. Like I said, I don't think there's anything about our evolutionary history that adds to our value. So that would be my answer.
Anything to add to that?
No.
Okay. Is there anything that either one of you would like to